Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this video. My name is Tyler Simone and you are watching Reading in Black. Before we get into this video about the one and only The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett, I just want to say hello and welcome to all of my new subscribers. Happy Black History Month. It's February 2nd. What better way to start Black History Month than to be reading The Vanishing Half? And also, the readathon that I'm a part of, Diversathon 2021, is continuing on into February. February is going to be hosted by a YouTuber by the name of Darkest Wings Reads. So head on over to her YouTube channel and see what she chose to read for the month. Her prompt is a main character with a mental illness, which should be really interesting. I'm excited to host next month. I'll be reading a book set in Ghana. So if you want to tag along and read with me, please feel free to do so. I will introduce the book that I choose later on in the month. But with all of that being said, let's talk about this book. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett. It was 2020's Book of the Year. There were book clubs all over the world who were reading this. Everybody was loving it and I knew I had to get my hands on it, and so I did. I've had it for a little while, but I'm just now getting into it, and I'm gonna be honest, I absolutely love it so far. What I love about this book is that it is fiction, but I almost feel like it's a bit of a history lesson, especially if you are not Black, and even if you are Black, it just gives you this outward look on our community and some of the conversations that happen within our community still to this day. So this story is set between the 1950s and the 1990s, and it's all about these two twin girls. They are mixed race and they're light skinned. Their names are Desiree and Stella, and they grew up in this really small Black community. But what's interesting about this Black community is that it is made up of light-skinned people only, which is just crazy in itself. The girls were completely inseparable as children, but once they grew up, they chose to live two very different lives. One chose to live life as a Black woman, and the other chose to live life as a white woman. The events that are taking place are not in chronological order. Everything is kind of place here, place there. Nothing is lined up as it happened, which can be kind of confusing. I always have to take notes in my books regardless of how the book is written, but it keeps things interesting and you start to learn things as you go, and you're like, oh, so that's when they met. Oh, that's who he was married to. Even though Stella and Desiree are twins, they're not necessarily identical in the way that they think, the way that they act, or the lives that they want for themselves. And that plays out, you know, obviously later on in the story. But that's how they were as children even. One of the things that intrigued me right off the bat was this town full of light-skinned people. I'm wondering, was it intentional? Was it an accident? Is this an actual town? So I watched a few interviews of Brit, and she said that this town specifically is not real, but it is based off of a story that her mom had told her at one point in time. Her mom was telling her about this town that she had knew of when she was a child that consisted of just light-skinned people, and Brit kind of took that idea and ran with it, and that was the inspiration behind this book. So yes, Desiree and Stella are both twins, but they are not completely identical. The way that they carry themselves, the way that they dress, the way that they think, the way that they act is different. And I think that that brings up a really good topic of conversation, and that is just the multiple facets of Blackness. I feel that Blackness is often portrayed as being one thing, like we are all one way, we all behave one way, we all like certain things, and that's just it. And if we venture outside of that, we are viewed as trying to be something other than Black, which is a bizarre idea to have. But because Desiree and Stella are both twins, you kind of expect that they're gonna be pretty similar, but they're really not. They have more differences than they do similarities, and I think that that's really interesting. Not only does this book tackle one's identity with Blackness and how mixed race or light skinned people view themselves in society, or what they identify with, but it also tackles society's perception of Blackness. So I wrote down a few things that I love so far about this book. I love how detailed she is about each character. I can picture all of them and I feel what they feel sometimes. I feel a connection to certain conversations. They're not always the most positive connection. Like when they're talking about dark-skinned people being dark-skinned, it doesn't always feel great to read about yourself in such a negative way, but I also am starting to get a better idea of how these ideas are passed on from generation to generation, which is another thing that I loved about this book. The twins' mother has a way of talking about dark-skinned people, and I can see how colorism just gets passed on year after year after year, because the ideas about dark-skinned people or Black people are so strong. Another thing is that I love that this book discusses the issue of colorism within the Black community. It was not our creation, but we do perpetuate it and keep it alive. Colorism was not necessarily something that the Black community created. We deal with it still to this day. And personally, I think it's our own fault because we have kind of internalized these ideas about race and about skin color, about one color being better than the other. The closer you are to white, the more pure and the more superior you are to those who have darker skin. And I just wish we would stop doing that, because we deal with a bunch of other issues outside of our community, but within the Black community, colorism exists. And I like that this book talked about it in a way where people who are not of the community can get a better idea of what's happening within the community. In one of her recent interviews, I think it's the one she did with Trevor Noah, she was talking about the absurdity of race and how the way in which race and color is talked about in this story really allows you to see how absurd our view of race is. And I feel that because when you're reading these conversations and these negative ideas about certain people, you almost can't help but be confused about why you feel that way about someone, especially when you get to see both sides. When you have someone over here talking so negatively about this character over here who is dark-skinned, who happens to be one of the sweetest people, who is a gentleman or whatever it is, you can't help but be confused about why society has such a negative view of these people. Not only do I love Brit's book, but I also love that she wants to tell stories about Black love and about Black joy and about all the complexities that are present in the Black community, because there are a ton. We're not all the same. There are lots of stories to be told, and I love anybody who is willing to tell those stories. If you haven't read The Vanishing Half yet, I suggest that you do. It's an amazing story. I love it so far. Let me know down below if you've read it or if you plan to read it. I am so happy you joined me today. I appreciate you for watching as always. I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.